Hello everyone, welcome back to another video of Anime Oracles, and today's video is about GT4 and my review of it. After the devastating result of Operation Handcuffs in GT3, the story continues with Toma and Co. in LA. Now the conflict of the volume is based on a mother-daughter relationship along with a definitive element of mystery. In a bizarre turn of events, the entire population of Los Angeles has disappeared, and it's up to Kamachi, Toma, and Index and others to resolve the incident. Coming to the structure, as far as the structure is concerned, it's pretty reminiscent of how books centered around a mystery function. In particular, the beginning of this book did remind me of 450 from Paddington by Agatha Christie. Now coming to how mysteries are handled in a book where something bizarre happens, the characters pick up on the various clues, develop hypotheses, and over time narrow down the results. Kamachi is kind of brilliant in this aspect, and he went as far as to list out all the hypotheses made by various characters. That's actually amazing. It gives an innovative sense of structure to the book, kind of like New Testament Volume 4, which frequently switched between perspectives with the main character being guided behind the scenes, or NT3, in which he used a camera gimmick. The various cameras were used to show different point of views of the characters, and the enemy and the reader had the same view of all the events. I actually congratulate Kamachi on this. It's rare for a long-running series to actually be experimental with structure. In fact, I don't really think a novel will employ something like this in which they actively write down list out the hypothesis. That's something I would imagine would be more appropriate for a visual medium. In a nutshell, the plot is everyone in LA getting Thanos snapped and Toma having to investigate and bring them back. As far as how the various themes were handled in this volume, I must say I was quite speechless. It was really done very brilliantly. To start off, Melzabeth Grocery wanted to transform the space industry via creating a system which used information generated from the artificial spinal cord based on her own body to prevent space accidents which happen due to nuclear energy powering satellites. Well, that's a lot of technobabble, but I really appreciate incorporating the idea of modern startups, stock markets, and business firms in the conflict of this volume, as Anna, the magic side villain herself, is using a massive IT company. It gives Melzabeth a humanizing aspect, and it makes her betraying RNC occultics because of their non-ethical practices quite believable and honestly pretty endearing. And because of the unparalleled genius Melzabeth showed, she became something of an obsession for Anna, which actually worked quite well to show her attitude in GT2, where Anna drew a clear contrast between Melzabeth, the kind of genius Melzabeth is, and the kind of genius level 5s are. Level 5s are geniuses in their own rights, but they aren't sensible, which is not the case for Melzabeth at all, who had her goodwill and genius and wits about her at all times while she was working on her dreams. The way Anna tramples on somebody's dream, or how she steals away the product of somebody else's hard work, ties in pretty well with GT3. She directly messed with the results of Operation Handcuff by introducing a disruptive element like the coins, which messed up the entire flow of events in the volume and which even led to anti-skill resorting to mass suicide. I would say the additional motive Melzabeth had to set up her daughter's marriage in outer space was also quite endearing. It actually made me really feel for her and got me invested in her story. The sand mystery overall was so-so, but coupled with how it was used in conjunction with lore relating to Rosicrucians, I think some appreciation is in order. According to the conflict of the volume, flying structures called as logistic hornets were using mass drivers for transferring goods. The way the symbolism is used is directly explained by Othinus in her dialogue. The rose is the organization, the nectar hidden within the flower is knowledge, and I suppose the hornets buzzing around the flower would be the experts seeking that hidden knowledge. Quite the name for the tools flying around the world for a massive IT company. The motto Dat Rosa Mel Abipus, meaning the rose feeds the bees, is representative of Rosicrucians who gathered the pollen and nectar of the rose in order to transform it into a bee, bread, and honey, at the same time pollinates the rose. I like how Kamachi used an actual real-life Rosicrucian motto, used it in conjunction with science. That's actually a pretty good way to carry the core spirit of this series, which has always been when science and magic cross paths, the story begins. In addition to this, xenophobia was also a major theme in this volume, as the clones were being revealed to the world. As for any unprecedented event or any new unknown technology or any new unknown factor, or humans have this tendency to resist any new kind of change. They show a sort of rejection. When this fear of the unknown is directed towards people, it's known as xenophobia, and that was quite prevalent in this volume, especially how the opposition leaders were constantly talking about the clones and why they could be harmful and why an existence like that shouldn't be allowed in American borders. The Vice President Darius Hewlane of Toaru Madutsuno Indexes America stated that his fear of technology was a major driving factor behind his motives. In the skirmish between him and Katse, he admitted that immigrants were free to come into America and work with them, but not when it overtook their own people's lives data, or not when they were taking over the entire technology space of the country as a whole. It's actually a very common kind of fear that's seen in a lot of countries. So that's actually pretty realistic depiction, and that's something I really liked in this volume. The clones were also another huge factor that scared Darius. And because of these motives that got set up parallelly in the confrontation with Roberto, the final reveal, which showed that Darius was actually the person Toma was fighting the entire time, worked quite well in conjunction with the two confrontations. I really liked how the villains were set up in this volume. There were plenty of confrontations in this volume. A couple of the battles, like Kanzaki's confrontation with RNC Magician, were used to impart information to the protagonist to help them get closer to finding the answer to the mystery in the volume, that is, how the 30 million population of LA vanished. I like how the volume poetically set up Misaka sisters versus Accelerator's 5-hour model, which contrasts beautifully with what their positions were when they were fighting the original way back in OT3. The fights truly picked up during the Doll and Melzabeth confrontation with Toma. The two switched places and manipulated the world's information to blame whatever crimes they commit on Melzabeth. Just when Toma was cornered, the clones had an amazing entrance. Dion was the one behind this, as they mentioned using the knowledge from British government to interfere in the skirmish. So it's nice to see that there are very few wasted scenes or elements in this volume, even Hamazura being shot in GT3 playing a major role indirectly, as that is what spurred Dion into action. In fact, the last fight, with all 30 million lives at stake, made for a great battle with meaningful obstacles and risks. I really like how Style stood up against the Logistic Hornets in order to negate this atmospheric control. The entire time in the volume, Style was the one who was always doubting Melzabeth and sort of providing the pessimistic perspective. The entire volume built up to this moment, with Style looking for residual thoughts in the present that Melzabeth left for Helcalia, which led him to admitting his mistake and finally help in the final battle. I feel that was a nice way to incorporate his contribution to the final fight, therefore leaving out very few superficial characters or factors in this volume. It's nice to see Kamachi did two confrontations in parallel, Roberto versus Darius and Toma versus Citrinitas. The usage of the Doll and Melzabeth constantly switching roles and positions had a vibe similar to Saint Germain and Toma in GT2, but it added a certain grotesque element to the fight, and that's something I really like. I like how the final outcome and victory was attributed to many factors. Style wanting to redeem himself after realizing that Melzabeth did nothing wrong. He used Innocentius to interfere with the atmospheric control of a logistic hornet. But my favorite part was the Hornets themselves developing sympathy for Melzabeth's cause, which ultimately resolved the cold wave situation and brought the population back. It's a great way to give the characters agency and make their presence count. I have to say that Kamachi finally did what he was talking about. He brought back more of the existing cast like Style, Kanzaki for this volume. Now I must say I wasn't too big of a fan of how Kanzaki was handled. I felt she could have contributed more to the volume instead of Toma and Othinus just sort of using the information gained from her loss to figure out how Anna does things. It did tie in nicely with how things went down in GT3 Operation Handcuffs though. Apart from that, the volume also had many existing characters like Mikoto and Misaki, and I like how the volume touched on their respective perspectives and conflicts with the sisters arc. Misaki didn't opt for a baby doll nightwear simply for fun purposes with Toma. She has problems with hospital gowns because it reminds her of the Clone Dolly project and her time at Ideal. It's a nice touch in terms of character writing. Similarly with Mikoto, she paid extra for Comedy Channel in the hospital, and when Misaki asked her as to why she wasn't rushing to the trial, she sort of averted her gaze and said the verdict would be announced no matter what she watched anyway. I knew her getting overly worried about something wasn't going to help anyone. This goes to show that she definitely is worried about how things will turn out and is just trying to distract herself. Index's past with style was again teased in this volume. Now since Kamachi used the OT1 trio again after all this time, I do expect an organic build-up for the backstory. The volume also did a good job of reminding the audience about Style and Kanzaki's respective characterization. Style acting hostile to get Helkalia to trust Toma and using himself as bait to draw out any major magician in chapter 2 was reminiscent of his dynamic with Toma, tracing all the way back to OT1 and OT2. It also shows his attitude as a professional magician. Kanzaki not being able to abandon people stems from her goal and magic name. From the initial assault that the Rosicrucian magician inflicted on them, Kanzaki implicitly determined that since she was a saint, she would obviously be the biggest obstacle in the path of the magician. Hence, she decided to be the prime bait, even resolving not to let Style play a role in this. She doesn't let enemies or allies die. This is an aspect that is focused more upon in her short story. You can definitely check it out if you want. Coming to the next segment, Toma and Helkalia's verbal skirmish was also another high point of the volume. It showed Toma's nature of being able to come to an understanding with people even far younger in age than him, and he literally will do everything in his power to help someone he finds worth saving, irrespective of whether they are good or evil. It is reminiscent of the story in 99 where he decided to pick a fight with the entire world for Athena's sake. He painstakingly made sure to dig up information about Melzabeth in order to reassure Helkalia that her mother was a good person and she was someone he would save at all costs. There was some introspection into Anna's methods by how the things were done in this volume and how she basically tried to set up Helkalia against her mother, Melzabeth. She always chooses the cruelest method that provides maximum entertainment to her. Another thing I liked is the foul-mouthed American Misaka. Kamachi sort of missed out on this opportunity in OT22 by not making the Misaka speak up Russian, but I really liked the Misaka sisters have been showing the tendency to pick up accents and behaviors based on the countries they were sent to. They literally used swear words and middle finger gestures while confronting the enemy. Ever since GT, Kamachi has been trying to show various different viewpoints among the sisters. Not all of them like the same person or share the same interests. They are evolving beyond the hive mind type of entity that they seem to be at the beginning. According to the story, Wheel of the Misaka Network is a sort of aggregate of everyone. She is an entity that talks about the general opinion, but it's nice to see individuality becoming more prominent. The conflicts tied very well to one another, I must say, as Melzabeth's sympathizing conflict was an event that Accelerator utilized to reveal the existence of the clones and confess his crimes. In cooperation with Dion, the clones received information and vowed to protect someone like Melzabeth and to support Toma. Just as Accelerator had planned in GT1, he used his crimes to direct media hatred and disgust away from the clones and towards himself. The situation made a public display of how the clones were capable of sympathizing with humans and showcasing human behavior, human emotions, thinking human thoughts, picking up dialect. In every aspect, the volume uses the opportunity to negate all the dehumanizing beliefs that may come due to an experiment like this. I feel this was a very good payoff to the setup in GT1. Hamazura also indirectly played a role via his actions in 2022. Roberto Cut says seeing Accelerator's resolve spurred into action. It was a very good way to show one chain of events triggering the other. I mentioned in my previous video where I talked about my expectations from the volume, and sure enough, Roberto turned out to be a very strong ally in this story. It's almost as if Roberto is a sort of driving force for perpetuating the essence of acceptance for the clones, like a driving force of chaotic good. He faced the opposition who were expressing concern, fear and disgust in response to the clones being allowed to enter the country. Talking about his own immigrant origin, he talks about the fundamental aspects of what makes America stand out, that is their policy of not discriminating people based on race, gender, and he also expanded the scope of this policy to include scientifically created entities like the clones. Scene where Darius is recognized as suspicious and a confrontation happens with both of them pulling out a shotgun was quite amazing. The moment where the people from China, France, Australia, US and even churches were welcoming the clones and they were offering their full support. I think this is actually one of the most powerful moments not only in GT but also in the entirety of Tornado series. In fact, I think this particular line they even threw a reference to Superman. I really like that Kamachi made sure to tie in all of Railgun's storyline with Misaki and Mikoto both behaving like proud sisters when they saw the clones stand up to protect Melzabeth and to fight for Toma. I think it was nice to focus on this aspect of their character arcs in this volume before a possible power-up story arc happens. It's interesting to note the sudden revelation of Alice in Wonderland in the post-credits section. Although if you look closely enough, the symbolism was there even in GT3. Anna's Sprengel, represented by roses and therefore the color red, dyed Accelerator's world, who has taken up the color white ever since WW3 arc of Index with blood, red painted upon white. This is a direct reference to the Red Queen painting the white roses red. There was also symbolism with mirrors in GT1, where Accelerator refused to look at the mirror inside his cell to avoid having to look at Last Order. Alice in Wonderland is a highly referenced story in Japanese media. Acclaimed mangaka like Clamp and many others have already used this. So it comes as no surprise that Kamachi decided to incorporate something like this. Also in this volume, the clones have been revealed. Their existence has finally been made public. So I wouldn't find it too surprising if Misaka Tabikage, Mikoto's father, had some role in the future. If you have noticed, Kuroko has already thrown offhand references to Mikoto's family in GT2. And Tabikage was shown to be greatly shocked upon seeing Mikoto piloting something as deadly as the AAA when she arrived at England to save his life. Now, given Alistair's activity has resurfaced this volume, with him resolving to defeat Anna, I do see a possibility of Kamachi making use of the implications of Tabikage and Alistair's short exchange in Index SS2. My overall verdict of the volume is, it's quite easily a 9 out of 10 volume for me. I like how the volume set up battle using both science and magic to set up a conflict which had a well-endowed mystery at its center. I wish characters like Index and Kanzaki got better participation in the volume, but since the Othinus-Toma dynamic in the volume was really good, I think I'll leave Kamachi off the hook for that. The way Othinus is so blunt with Toma and provides him genuinely good advice has always been a very enjoyable factor to me in their dynamic, and this volume had plenty of elements utilizing that, and that's something I really enjoyed. I also really enjoyed that Saint Germain got referenced quite a lot, and we can see Toma getting affected to a certain extent because of how volume GT2 turned out, and especially after he learned that Anna had intentionally lost against him in order to cause the mayhem in GT3. The emotional conflicts were well presented and they were enough to get me invested in the mother-daughter conflict. I think Kamachi finally learned to nail single volume characters in GT3, and that skill is definitely seen here as well. Overall, I really enjoyed. Looking forward to future volumes. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give a thumbs up if you liked the video and subscribe for future content. Have a nice day.